Hello, today we're going to have a look at how we can repair and rebuild the Nuffield water pump. This article here that I've took off a tractor. This one has been specially prepared so I can pull it to bits in front of the camera without a press. But this is a job that I would recommend you get a press or access to a press to tackle. I've done one many years ago and ended up destroying it. I'm sure there'll be somebody out there who can tell me that they've done it without a press. But my advice is if you're going to repair this water pump, get access to a press. You will need it. So first of all, the pump, it comes in two bits. The rear part comes away, and if you're repairing your tractor, that part can actually stay on the tractor engine. You don't need to take that off. So let's put that down over here out of the way, and then we'll look at the rest of the pump. I'll sit it on the vise here, nice and close to the camera. As you can see, I've already loosened it. This top bit comes off, you take the 4 bolts out, and this top plate comes off. I should do. I've pushed it together, here we go, comes off. That is the drive between the pulley and the impeller at the back. Now I've took that off, I can turn it over, and the impeller comes out. That's driven by the plate at the front, down the middle. Here in the back is the seal that we'll be replacing, and just behind that is a little brass bush that supports the impeller so that it runs central. Now this pump's been specially prepared. I've ground all the bearings slightly undersize so it pulls to bits. And the next part is take the 3 bolts out here, and that bit comes away like that. So that's the bit that's holding the seal. We'll put that down, and then, as I say, this one's been specially ground so I can disassemble it in front of the camera. And then the drive tube comes away. So that's just a tube that carries the 2 bearings. In the back of there is a little bronze bush that centres the impeller. Now we go to the actual pulley. First of all, there's a little spacer that's got a bevel in the back. I'll hold that up to the camera, I don't know whether you can see it. That fits over the radius at the back of the drive tube that stops it cracking. And then inside here is a ball race, a spacer, and a second ball race. And as I say, these are, I've ground all these down so I can disassemble it in front of the camera for display purposes. So next we'll look at what equipment I've got together for taking this to bits, and we'll look at the drifts that I've been making in preparation for this repair article. This is the selection of drifts that I've got together for repairing the water pump. The first one is just a short length of 35mm steel bar. I use this for pressing the bearings in and out of the pulley. The second one is a piece of 25mm steel bar, and I've just turned this last 3" down to 24.5mm. I use this for pushing the support tube out of the bearings when they're still in the pulley, the first bit of disassembling. This drift is just a 14mm steel bolt that I've cut the head off, and I use this for pushing the bronze bush out of the back of the support tube. And the last one is just another bit of 25mm steel bar, and I've turned the end down to 17mm, and I use that for installing the new bush in the back of the support tube. We're now outside at the press, and I've removed the small circlip on the front of the drive tube, and I'm going to push that out of the pulley. I've now removed the support tube from the pulley, and interestingly, in the back of the pulley here there should be a lip seal to keep the grease in, but this I think has been reconditioned before, and they're probably concerned about a little bit of rust on here. They've left the seal out, but they've left the seal in the bearings, so that retains the grease in, and that's something we'll perhaps consider later on. I've removed the circlip from behind the bearings, so now we can press the bearings out of the pulley. There's all the bearings out, and plenty of grease all over my hands, so we can go back to the workshop now, and I'll wash all this and clean it out and check it all over, and then we'll look at starting to put it all back together. I've now cleaned out the pulley, got all the old grease out of it, and there's the back off with the seal to be replaced, cleaned it all up, so we're ready to start rebuilding it. Well, apart from the bearings, all the rest in the water pump are pretty specialist parts that you'll struggle to find. Fortunately for us, Charnleys, the Nuffield and Leyland dealers up in Lancashire, have put together a kit to repair these pumps. So let's have a look first at what you get in the kit. This arrived in the post the other day. There's a bag of parts. You even get a page from the repair manual that shows you what's in there, so let's have a look at everything that's in the kit. Spread it out on the bench, see what we've got. Right, we'll start. 2 new bearings, spacer for the bearings, the bevel bit that goes behind the bearings, the bronze support bush. There's a little rubber that goes on the impeller. I think it's to stop drips running along and wetting the impeller shaft. 1 new impeller shaft, 1 new impeller, the seal to go behind the bearings, gaskets, circlips to hold everything together, nut and washer to go on the front of the impeller shaft, and most importantly, a brand new seal. And that, as you can see, that's got a spring in it, and it's a carbon face. It actually fits on the back of the impeller like that, and seals. So there's all the parts. So now we can look at starting to rebuild the pump. And first of all, we'll look at this, the support tube. In the back of the support tube is this little bush. So if I just put that over there, like that, and using the 14mm bolt that I've cut the head off, put that in there and get a hammer. Out comes the old bush. Take that out, put that down that way. There's the new bush. I'll put that over the hole. Here's the piece that I turned, 17mm to fit, and I'll just tap that home and then check that we've not damaged it. We'll put the impeller shaft through it. Oh yeah, nice lovely fit. So all that wants is a bit of grease on it when we rebuild it. Right, that's that dealt with. We can put that to one side. Now we've got the housing that holds the seal. In the back of this housing there's a drainage slot, so if any water does get through, it escapes externally and the water doesn't get pushed through the actual bearings. I like the design of this pump because the bearings are quite big and they're completely separate and full of grease. I think it's a lot better pump than the later style pump. This here, some of you may recognise this pump. This is what's fitted from about 1968 onwards. It appeared on the 465 and it was on all the Leylands, and in there is a little bearing cartridge with quite small bearings, whereas you know, your Nuffield pump's got 2 of these large bearings in full of grease. It's quite a long-lived pump. Interestingly, on the forum we don't have many questions come up about leaking water pumps, so they must be quite good. But this one leaks, so I'm rebuilding it. Next, the seal. So I'll just lay that over there and get a socket and give it a knock, and out comes the old seal. As you can see, the old seal is completely different to the new seal, and on this one you can see there the rubber split. That's probably why it was leaking. So next thing is to install the new seal. I'll put that on there. I've got a socket that fits on it nicely so I can knock it into place, and all it wants is a bit of sealant on there, and we'll knock it into place. I'll just go and find some sealant. I've found some sealant now, but before we fit the new seal, there's a couple of drainage and vent holes in this casting, so just get a 4.5mm drill and just clean the rust out like so. Then we can look at fitting the new seal. I've found my favourite Loctite 510, so we get a bit of that on the back of the seal. That'll do. And just get the hammer, put the socket over it, and there's the new seal into place. So that's all ready. Next we can look at putting the bearings back in the pulley. Okay, we're back at the press now, and I'm going to put the bearings back in the pulley unit. And I've had a look at the situation, and I've decided to remove the seals out of the front bearing, but I'm going to leave the rear seal in the rear bearing. And also, once I've fitted the front bearing, I shall get the grease gun and fill the void between the bearings with grease, because Nuffield water pumps have this little limiter on the grease nipple, so you can only get half a shot of grease in them at a time. The idea is you don't put that much grease in that you force the seal out the back. The reason we grease it is to keep shoving grease into the bearings, but also through to the front of the pump, and then down between the drive shaft and the support tube to put some grease on the little bronze support bush at the back and stop that wearing out. So I'm going to put the front bearing in, and then I'll put the spacer in and fill the void with grease, and then put the rear bearing in, and then finally the circlip, and I shall fill the gap behind the rear bearing with grease, and then actually put the lip seal in. So it's got two seals on the back. It gives it double chance. You'll have to look at your own pump when you repair it and decide what you're going to do. So let's put the bearings back in. Next I'll drop the spacer in, and then we can fill the gap up with grease. Just line the spacer up. And then fit the back bearing with the seal outwards this one in with the spigot on so it keeps everything lined up. That's the two bearings in, and plenty of grease. And next we can put the rear circlip back in. Right, back to the workshop. I've got the rear seal now. That just wants pushing in there, and it goes slightly below the surface. So what I should do is push it in with the vise and then just put a washer on top to get it that last bit in. So square it up. That's in, then put a washer on top. Get it against there. And that's just pushed the seal in slightly below the surface. So we'll go back to the press now, and we'll put the drive tube in. Before I fit the drive tube, I'm going to fill the void between the bearing and the back seal with grease. Like that. And also put a bit on the shaft and where the seal's going to run. I'll just smear this grease round here. And the last thing you do before you fit the drive tube, the support tube into the back of the bearings, is fit the chamfered spacer with the chamfer towards the radius, like that. Fit that on there, and then that can be pushed in. I've pushed that all the way home now. It needs a circlip fitting on the front, and I think before I go any further I'll take this restrictor out and fit a normal grease nipple, and I'll pump her up with grease until the grease comes out the front here, so I know there's plenty of grease in it, because we're relying on that being full of grease, so when you give it the occasional half shot it shoves some grease down the middle between the drive shaft and the support tube to lubricate that bronze bush at the back. We're back in the workshop now, and when I fitted the circlip on the front of the support tube I didn't hear it click into place, and I had a look. There was about 8mm between the ends of the circlip, so I got a hammer on it and a little screwdriver and give it a tap, and finally got it into the groove. And when it's fitted, the gap between the ends of the circlip are about 3 to 4mm. Take a look. As you can see, I can just get the end of that electrical screwdriver between the ends of the circlip. Make sure that's in the groove. It's obviously a bit of a tight fit. I'm now going to fill the void between the bearings completely with grease. I've took the restrictor out and fitted a normal grease nipple, and I can just pump it up. It's coming up now. I'll spin that round. I think we can say that's full of grease. We're now ready to put the two halves of the water pump back together. First of all, select the little rubber seal from the kit, and that just slips in the back here behind the bronze bush. I think its purpose is just to try and keep a bit of grease on the bush. So that goes in there. I'm going to clamp that in the vise, and then that goes on there, and we can put the bolts back on. We're now ready to put the impeller and the shaft back in the pump, and this just screws on the back. There's nothing in the instructions about tightening it or anything, and it only goes one way and the thread's going to hold it tight, so get a pair of pliers and grip the shaft, but not where it's going to run through the brass bush. Don't want to damage that, so I'll grip it up the front here and just tighten that on by hand, and then that goes in the back here like that, through there, put that back, and then we're going to stop the camera in a minute because I've got to put the little tiny key in that keyway there, and then the front goes on and you tighten the nut up. Once you've tightened the nut up, go back to the back here, and these fans on the impeller are supposed to be pulled up to within 1/10 of the housing, so you know, just touching them back a fraction, and you have to adjust that with shims. But strangely there wasn't any shims in this water pump when I took it to bits, and there wasn't any shims in the kit, so I'll let you know in a few minutes when I've put it all back together and see how it goes. Well, I've discovered a slight problem with the repair kit. The key that goes in the keyway in the shaft, the key's wider than the slot, and I think what's happened is over the years Mr. Charnley's tooling's got worn, and those putting it in and making the keyway, it's not actually wide enough. So what we're going to do about it? Well, here's a little trick I discovered. These are slippery little customers to get hold of, these are half moon keys. But if you get a pair of pliers, you can grip it in the top of a pair of pliers like that, half sticking out, and then tighten the vise up on the pliers, get a file, and take a bit off it. So let's have a go now. That's better. We can now put the water pump together. So insert that in there. Now I've put the impeller back through the pump, I'm just going to give the bronze bush at the back here a couple of squibs of oil just to keep it wet until the grease gets down there. Now I can put the key back in the keyway like that and then put the top plate on. Which is easier said than done. There we go. And then the washer and finally the nut. Tighten that up, and we're looking for 10th thou clearance here, and if I just push the impeller forward you'll just see this gap open up here. That's just clearing. If that clearance was excessive, or this clearance, you can put shims in there, but this won't need any. So all I need to do now to finish the job off is put the split pin through there, put the bolts in, take this temporary grease nipple out and put the restrictive greaser back in, and that pump's ready to go back on the tractor. Happy tractoring everybody. Anybody wanting a repair kit for their water pump, here's the contact details of the firm who manufacture them.